Wanting to learn to mill your own grains at home and bake that delicious bread, but maybe you're a little overwhelmed and wondering how in the world you start all this. Well, good news, because this video is basically a free mini course for y'all to teach you in a simple way how to get started milling your own grains. Hey y'all, my name is Felicia, and on this channel I teach you all about milling your grains, baking bread, using freshly milled wheat grains in your regular life. And I have been teaching this on YouTube for 4 years, milling my own grains for well over a decade. So I've definitely learned a thing or two, but I also see a lot of the same questions that pop up over and over again. And that's why I wanted to basically put together this little free mini course for y'all to help make it a bit more easy to start milling your grains at home. So you may have noticed that this is a very long video because it is a whole course and it's using videos that I've already done on this channel, but we're putting it in a better order where it makes sense and you're not having to spend time searching YouTube for these specific type of videos. Before we begin, just know that this free mini course is brought to you by 4 Generations Organic Farms. They are one of our wonderful American farmers that provide us wonderful organic wheat berries, and they're actually perfect, especially for newbies, because I find that, first of all, it is hard red and hard white wheat that they grow, which are 2 of the grains that I recommend when you're starting off. But they are organic grains where they take really great care of their soil. There's no glyphosates, no GMO, but on top of that, I find that their hard red and hard white wheats are very consistent grains when you're milling them yourself, which makes it way easier for beginners. So you may hear about them more throughout this entire course, but to check them out, just go to grainsandgrit.com/4generations and use code grainsandgrit for 10% off. And the link will also be in the description box below. Now, here's what you're gonna learn throughout this course. Basically, how, of course, to start milling your grains. We're starting with the basic. You're going to be learning of how to buy a grain mill, the things that you need to know to buy a grain mill, which grain is right for depending on what recipe that you are going for, how to be storing those grains that you have spent your hard-earned money on. And then, of course, giving y'all my first recipe that I always recommend people learning first. That is my simple yeast bread loaf recipe, because you just got to get a good loaf of bread under your belt. And then you're gonna be ending it with some commonly asked questions about the flour, things like that at the very end. Another thing is you need to stay tuned until the end, because I have a very special announcement that I am super excited about, and you're gonna wanna stick around to know what that is. So let's dive in. So you're new to the whole freshly milling your grains, maybe even new to stocking up on grains, everything dealing with real whole grains, and now you are slightly overwhelmed because you've been searching on YouTube, and now right now you can't even, it's difficult to find grains, so it can be a bit overwhelming. If you are a newbie, a beginner to milling your own wheat, baking your own bread, storing your grains, then stay tuned, because this video is for you. I'm going to be walking you through simplifying it down to what you need, bare bones, to get started. What are necessities? What are the nice to haves? So especially right now when, you know, getting everything is a bit more difficult to get your hands on, or you maybe just don't have the budget to go out and buy everything under the sun. We're going to be discussing that for you, of where you can get started. So basic number 1, you now want to mill your own wheat to make your own grains. Well, you need a grain mill. Now, this can be a manual grain mill or it can be an electric grain mill. And then in the electric grain mills, we have the impact mill or the stone mill. And this alone, choosing a grain mill, can be crazy overwhelming, and because it is a larger purchase, especially for your electric mills. I mean, you're looking at anywhere from $300 to $500 investment of a grain mill. So I totally understand why this is a bit of a large decision that you're wanting to take your time on. Now, I did do a video all about choosing a grain mill. I will link everything like that down below. So it's going to be walking you through the different types of grain mills that are out there, and then the questions that you need to ask yourself: which one
is best for your needs. So you'll be able to make that decision a little bit easier. For those who do not know, my first grain mill was a Wonder Mill. She was an impact mill, Miss Wanda Wonder Mill, and she's been wonderful this whole time. But I have recently gotten in the past year a stone grind mill as well. I actually have the Nutri-Mill Harvest, which her name is Nancy, in case you did not know that. She has been named. So those are the two grain mills that I have. I've also done a review of an actual cheaper, like $50 hand manual mill that, you know, it did the job well. It definitely takes longer doing it by hand, but it did it well. And I'll link that review down below. Bottom line with the grain mills, if you were looking at the Mock Mill, the Nutri-Mill Harvest, Nutri-Mill Classic, the Wonder Mill, or the Como Mill electric grain mills, those are the most common ones. And really, you're not going to go wrong with any of those. They are all really great grain mills that are going to get you the nice flour that you need to bake your bread. But again, watch that video about choosing a grain mill to determine which one might suit you better. Now, for those of you who do not have a budget for a grain mill right now, but you may have something like a Vitamix blender, a really powerful blender, you can start to grind your grains with that. It will get you flour. Trust me, I've done that by accident. It will mill it into flour, but you can only do about a half a cup to a cup at a time because it needs to be very quick, because a Vitamix, a blender, will really cook your grains where it's going to start cooking those nutrients out. So if you have a blender, a powerful enough blender, you can start there, but it's going to take you longer and you just have to watch the heat of the grain. So I do highly recommend that you do invest in a good grain mill. Definitely save up your money for that, but you can start with a blender right now. Now, second thing, back to the basics. You have your grain mill. You have a way of getting those wheat berries into flour. That's what you're going for, y'all. And remember, people have done this for thousands of years. They've done with, like, rocks, stones. You know, it can be done. So once you have figured out however you're going to be getting the wheat berries converted into flour, now you actually need to decide, well, what wheat berries should you get? Oh, heavens, especially now. Okay, so I also did a video about this, about what wheat berries do what. Which wheat berries should I be getting? I will link that video down below as well if you have not watched it. And I go through the most common wheat berries and grains and what they're best for. But bottom line, back to the basics. All you need, okay, all you need, basics, is you need a hard wheat for your yeast spreads. This can be hard red or hard white. It doesn't matter if it is spring or winter wheat. Don't worry about that right now, people. Don't worry about that. These are the basic things. You need a hard wheat, a hard red or hard white. Right now, hard white is very difficult to get your hands on, so get you a hard red. It works just fine for your yeast spreads. It's gonna be fine. It's gonna be fine. Just get you a hard wheat for your yeast spreads, and then a soft white wheat for your baked goods. Now, because again, the hard wheats have a higher protein, meaning they'll have a higher gluten content to develop the gluten in the yeast for the bread to rise. A soft white wheat is not going to do yeast spreads. It doesn't have enough protein or the gluten content to make your high yeast spreads, but they're perfect for your baked goods, your cookies, your cakes. Definitely you want it for your biscuits, things like that. Now, I have been asked right now in this crazy time, does hard white wheat work for like your cookies and baked goods and things like that? You can definitely use it for muffins. I personally have never used it for cookies, so that's a little bit of a risk. But generally speaking, soft white wheat for your baked goods and a hard wheat for your yeast spreads. Do not worry about the ancient grains right now. Don't worry about all the fancy things. Focus on these. Back to the basics. Just basics. You need a grain mill, you need a hard wheat, and you need a soft white wheat, and you're going to be set to go. The third big thing of getting back to the basics is grab you one recipe and master it. This is the recipe to rule them all. One good bread recipe will get you your yeast spreads, and I have one that I will link below. My simple yeast bread recipe. I get very tall, large 2-pound loaves with these. I get very tall, large 2-pound loaves with these recipes, with my bread recipe, and it's pretty easy. It has no extra additives like the lecithin or the vital wheat gluten. It is just your flour, your salt, your water, your yeast, your honey, and your oil, and that's it. So it's pretty easy to make great loaves. Many testimonies of y'all making these loaves. But with that one recipe, I can make rolls, I can make hamburger buns, I even use it for my pizza. So get you the one recipe and master it. Don't worry about your artisan breads. Don't even worry about your sourdough right now unless you are already extremely experienced in sourdough. Just do a very basic loaf bread and use that also for your rolls and your hamburger buns and your pizza crust. Just go with that right now, y'all. No need to complicate this. One recipe, master it, and it'll rule them all. And then we can get into the whole fancy pizza crust and, you know, all the things later on. But this is back to the basics, what you start with. And again, that recipe and video will be linked below. Oh, those are the 3 basics that if you just want to start, you're starting out, what to focus on. Get you a way to mill those grains, whether it be an electric or a hand mill. Get you a hard wheat and a soft wheat, so that covers your yeast breads and your baked goods, and then get you one bread recipe to master. Now, I also have recipes for muffins, cornbread, and pancakes. Those are quick bread recipes, and those are super easy to do. So if you're intimidated by the yeast bread recipe, but you really want to start milling your own wheat, okay, do pancakes, muffins. There you go. And I'll link those videos as well. I also have a biscuit recipe. Cornbread is also very easy. So those are quick, easy recipes that you can do. All right, so those are the 3 things, y'all. That's it. That's it. That's all you need to get started. Again, I know we can be so distracted by Pinterest and all the fancy things. Now, some nice to have things is you see me in my videos with my recipes where I have my Bosch Universal Mixer, which is an amazing mixer. And you do need a more heavy duty mixer like the Bosch Universal Mixer, or even the Ankarsum and Ankarsum and I'll link that one though. There's another heavy duty, really good mixer that's actually made in Sweden. And those are the 2 main mixers that people swear by for handling the type of dough, the heavier dough that we're dealing with. But you do not need the fancy mixers. You don't even need a KitchenAid to get started. You can knead everything and mix everything by hand. And I did a video about that as well, as how to knead by hand if that is what you're having to look at right now. Don't worry about getting the really fancy machines. You can do this. People have been doing it for thousands of years without their fancy machines, and even cooking this over a fire, y'all. Okay, we now have temperature controlled ovens. Thank the Lord. But those are the nice to haves and mixers. Don't worry right now if you don't have that. You can bake bread just fine without it. And I did a video to help you out below. Now, other things to consider when starting out is, first of all, subscribing to this channel because I am all about real whole grains from a biblical perspective, and I teach you what to do with them, how to store them, why you need them, all about using freshly milled wheat. You will not see any all-purpose flour, store-bought flour, fake bread here, y'all. We are all about the real deal, the real whole grains. So definitely subscribe to this YouTube channel. Also follow me on Instagram at Grains and Grit. Instagram is where I really post things more in the moment. So when I hear of quick sales, or if I find some wheat berries or things like that, I generally post it on Instagram. So be sure to follow me there as well. And of course, I do have some freebies for you guys. We got a free grains calculator for those of you who want to know how much wheat that you're needing to buy for your family for however long. You just sign up for my newsletter and that comes to you absolutely free. And I also have a recipe cheat sheet. So all of those things down in the description box below. So those are the biggest things of just getting back to the basics. It is not complicated. Remember that people have been doing this for thousands of years in very primitive conditions. And in many parts of the world, they still are doing some sort of bread over a fire. Some places in India still cook over animal dung. I mean, there are very primitive places that are still cooking with whole grains. And so you can do this too. When I started, I could burn water. Like I could barely cook, and then like a year and a half after I got married and coming from burning water, I was milling my own wheat and baking bread. And look at me now, I have a YouTube channel teaching you all about how to do it. So if I can do it, you can do it. You can do this. Let's take a deep breath, let's keep calm and bake some bread. So hopefully this was helpful to you guys. Again, be sure to subscribe and check out the description box below for all the things that I mentioned. And as always, comment below if you've got any questions. I love hearing from you guys, and I'll see you next week. Bye.
So you are wanting to buy a grain mill and start your milling journey by milling those grains and baking that delicious bread. But before investing in a grain mill and purchasing one for yourself, there are some things that you need to know. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel, we talk all things real whole grains, all from a biblical perspective. I teach you all about milling your grains, baking with those grains, and more. Now, I have actually been milling for well over a decade, so trust me, I have experience with grain mills. And so there's some things that I have learned about grain mills that I'm wanting to impart to you to help you make the decision whenever purchasing a grain mill, because I understand that it can be a little overwhelming deciding which grain mill to get. Now, also with the experience of milling, I not only own these 3 grain mills, I actually own a total of 5 grain mills, some that I've definitely tried, and I've definitely learned a thing or two. So again, I know that shopping, because it is an investment, it can be overwhelming, and you may just wonder, especially when you just don't know what you don't know necessarily what grain mill you actually may be wanting and what will actually work for you and your situation and your family. Good news is it really boils down to one basic question, or 1 to 2 basic questions that you need to ask yourself. But before we get into that one important question, we're going to talk about a few of the little things to consider when deciding on what grain mill to get. Now, first of all, the categories that grain mills fall into. There are just 3 main categories that all the grain mills fall into. The first one are your impact grain mills. These are ones like your Wonder Mill, your Nutri-Mill Impact, and your Nutri-Mill Classic. Those are the most popular impact mills on the market. And what those do is they basically have steel burrs on the inside that spin really, really fast. And those grains basically impact and burst into fine flour. Now with your impact mills, you're not going to be able to get coarse grains or cracked grains. It's basically just good fine flour every single time, pretty easy. The second category are your stone grind mills, like your Nutri-Mill Harvest, the Mock Mill, and the Como Mill being the most popular stone grind mills on the market these days. And as the name implies, this is more of the traditional way that we have been grinding grains for thousands of years, just on a much smaller scale. And it's where you actually have 2 millstones that are together, and those grind together in order to give you your flour. Now, the beauty of the stone grind mills is that you can do cracked grains all the way to fine flour and everywhere in between. So you do have more versatility with those grain mills. And then the third category are your hand grind mills. I actually have 2 of those, the manual mills. I don't have them out because they take some, I don't use them regularly, but the beauty of the manual mills, as it implies, is you don't need electricity in order to run them. They are very manual and you hand crank them. Now, many of the manual mills, you can buy attachments to say hook up a drill or maybe to a bicycle or something like that to power it yourself. So for those of you who really want that off-grid solution, those are great. And the most popular ones on the market are the Wonder Junior Deluxe Grain Mill, which is what I have, as well as really expensive ones like the Diamine, which is a different type of technology with the wheel. Now, these manual mills are generally a lot like these stone grind mills in technology, where it's usually stones that are grinding together. And so the manual mills also give you the versatility of doing cracked grains all the way to coarse grain, or to fine flour, and everywhere in between. The other advantage of manual grain mills, depending on which one you get, is you can actually, they many times have steel burrs or other type of stones that you can use for wet grains. So you can also grind coffee, make peanut butter, masa harina, those type of things that are wet. Where your typical grain mills like your Impact and your stone grind mills, these are only for dry grains. You don't put anything wet in these grain mills ever. So those are just the 3 main categories. With all the grain mills you see, those are just the three that they're just gonna fall into. The second thing to consider whenever purchasing a grain mill is your space and also possibly the aesthetic that you are going for. So as you can see here, each of these particular grain mills, different sizes, different heights. This one has 2 pieces, so it comes here. This is the Wonder Mill. This stone grind mills, one thing to consider is you usually have to provide your own sort of bowl to capture the grains, where your impact grain mills already have a hopper that go with it. So in case I didn't mention this, this is the Wonder Mill. This is Miss Wanda, and this is the Nutrimel Impact Grain Mill. Miss Irene, I think is what I've chosen to name her. This is the Nutrimel Harvest, or Miss Nancy is her name. So yes, I name my grain mills. You have to, right? But as you can see, they all look different. So as far as if you plan on saying store it under your cabinets, the height requirement may be something to consider, or maybe the width, especially those of y'all who might have tiny kitchens, or maybe you want to put it away in a drawer or a cupboard, making sure that it will fit. So all of those specs, no matter what grain mill that you want to purchase, just go to the specs and they will all tell you the height, the width, and the depth of those grain mills. The second thing is the aesthetics. So as you can see, the Nutrimel Harvest has this beautiful wood. This is a bamboo outer layer, and it absolutely is a definitely more beautiful, eye-pleasing grain mill. And that's generally what the stone grind mills are. The exception would be the Mock Mill 100 and Mock Mill 200, where they're a bit more of the industrial type look that the impact mills have. But that is an option if you really want something pretty to look at in your kitchen, which is totally legit and many people want. Then a stone grind mill is probably going to be your best bet, because these impact mills, they are workhorses for sure. They will do a wonderful job, but they're not as pretty to look at. Another thing to consider, and this is especially important for those of you who might have more of an off-grid type setting, or say solar power, you really want to watch your power that you use. Just know that your impact grain mills use considerably more wattage than your stone grind mills. So your impact grain mills can range anywhere from 1200 to 1500 watts when using them. Now the beauty of that is these things will get you fine flour very, very quickly. So they are faster as far as milling the grains into fine flour. Contrast to your stone grind grain mills that generally use around 450 watts of power, and it does make it where it is going to be a bit slower in order to grind it. And then of course your manual mills are no power whatsoever. So you may live, as many of us do, on the electric grid, and it really doesn't matter. But for those of you that it matters, those are things to consider. Now, a note about the noise and the level of sound with these grain mills. Your manual mills are obviously the most quiet. They are the quietest mills. You'll still hear that grinding sound as you are grinding, but it's minus the electric sounds that come with the grain mills. So as far as your impact grain mills, these are pretty loud. They sound like a small aircraft taking off, not that bad, but they do have more of that very high whiny, pitch when they start up. So they are louder. Compared to my stone grind mill, when I turn her on, she's actually pretty quiet until I start grinding the grains. And then whenever you hear that, it's not as high pitch of a sound. It's just the sound of grains grinding under stones. So if you are very, very sensitive to very loud, like those higher pitch sounds, you're going to want to stay away from an impact mill and probably go with a stone grind mill for the sake of your hearing. Again, it's not bad. It's not like it's going on for hours, but some people are very sensitive when it comes to auditory sounds. So something to consider. Okay, so we're on number four, I think. I can't remember. Whatever number we are on, the next thing to consider is, for some people, it is very important if your product is USA made, or like made in the United States, or is a United States owned company. because not all the grain mills are the same. Now, for those of you who don't care whatsoever, you can skip this part. But just know that the companies like Nutrimill and Wondermill are USA-based companies. They generally put their mills together. They do assemble their grain mills here in the United States, but I have confirmed with Nutrimill, and I'm assuming Wondermill as well, because they have LG motors, that parts may come from outside the United States, but assembly generally happens in the United States. But as far as the companies, they are based here in the US. Contrast to your Como grain mills and your Mock Mill, which are German-based companies. So everything is done over there in Germany, and then it's shipped over to the United States. And that is why whenever those grain mills go out of stock, it can be a while before they come back in stock. So if you're really wanting something now and you see that those particular mills are out of stock, many times I've noticed we don't necessarily know when they're going to come back in stock. So if you're wanting, and those are just the stone grind mills, the Como and the Mock Mill are stone grind mills. That's why I love the fact that Nutrimill has their own, because these are usually much easier to get a hold of, because they're right here in the United States. Now, for my international audience members, the Mock Mill and Como Mill may work better for you because they'll be easier to get for you than the ones here manufactured or produced in the United States. All right, the next thing to consider is, of course, the price. And I know that's a huge consideration for many, many people. So do know that the cheapest grain mill out on the market, besides like your really cheap manual grain mills, is actually the Nutrimill Impact grain mill. I did a review all about this. She is new on the market, and you know what? She gets the job done. She's a good grain mill. I would say an excellent starter grain mill if you're kind of unsure how much you're going to get into this, but she does the job very well. And she is the cheapest one, the most budget friendly, I should say, on the market without sacrificing quality. The next ones is the regular impact mills are usually also the next tier up. The Wondermill, the Nutrimill Classic are kind of the next tier up. And your stone grind mills are usually the more expensive ones that you can purchase on the market. It also depends on what size. I've really known the price difference being for the stone grind mills. You can get some all the way up that are like $700-800. It really just depends on what you're looking for, because there is a lot of variety in the stone grind, in the stone mill world. And so you can see the prices here range from anywhere from like $200 all the way up to like $700-800, all depending on the type of grain mill to get. Now, do know that Nutrimill frequently has sales for their grain mills and their mixers. And they are the only company that I always have a coupon code for y'all. So even if it's not on sale, you at least have a coupon code to knock off $20 from your order, which is wonderful. So Nutrimill is great at providing a lot of opportunities to save money, where contrast to Wondermill, I rarely ever see go on sale. Wondermill, you don't actually purchase from them directly. They're always through distributors like Pleasant Hill Grain, Breadbeckers, those type of people if you're looking at the Wondermill. And I rarely ever see those go on sale. If they do go on sale, it is through the distributor directly. So Pleasant Hill Grain decides to have a sale, or maybe Breadbeckers. So that's the thing with that. Your stone grind mills, I also rarely ever see Mock Mill or Como Mill go on sale either. I rarely see it. So if you're wanting the Wondermill, the Como Mill, and the Mock Mill, just go ahead and get it. Don't worry about waiting around for a sale, because who knows when it's going to come up, if there is one in the near future. Now, that's a great thing about making sure that you subscribe to this channel on YouTube and sign up for my newsletter, because anytime that there are sales, especially on grain mills and mixers, those high ticket items, I let you know as soon as possible. I also post it over on Instagram as well. You can follow me there at Grains and Grit. Hey, really quick, we need to stop here before we get to the main question that you need to ask yourself when purchasing a grain mill. We're going to hear from today's sponsors, which is 4 Generations Organic Farms, because along with your grain mill, you need something to grind. and 4 Generations Organic Farms is an excellent place to get high quality, wonderful wheat berries so you can start grinding those grains in your new grain mill and baking that delicious bread. Now, one great thing that I know that I love about 4 Generations is that they have really touched me personally. The fact that they have continued to sponsor me through this crisis that I've had recently where my husband was shot. I posted videos about that, and they've continued to support me personally as well as in business. And so for me, that shows me how great of a people that they actually are. They're really great people to work with. But also, their wheat berries are very clean. They are organic wheat berries, and they're shipped straight to your house and reasonably priced. And bonus, we're supporting farmers who believe in regenerative farming here in the USA and supporting our American farmers. So be sure to check them out. Just go to grainsandgrit.com/4generations. I got a coupon code for you for those of you who are purchasing for the very first time. And thank you so much to 4 Generations Organic Farms for sponsoring and supporting Grains and Grit. Okay, so now what you have been waiting for, the one simple question that you need to ask yourself when deciding upon what grain mill to get. And it really just boils down to this. Do you want fine flour every single time with just a simple push of the button, easy peasy, no problem whatsoever? Or do you want the ability to grind grains from coarse grains all the way to fine flour and everywhere in between? That's what you have to figure out. So if you just want a no fuss, I want fine flour that's perfect for bread baking every single time, and I just have to push a button, the Impact grain mills are for you. And now you have to decide between Wonder Mill, Nutrimill Classic, and the Impact. But you're going to want to stick to an Impact grain mill. Spoiler alert, that's actually what I use on a regular basis here in my house. I am regularly using Miss Wanda, and she's been my workhorse ever since I started milling my grains over a decade ago, because it's fast, it's easy. I throw in my grains, I walk away, and I know that I'm gonna have the flour that I need that is perfect for bread baking. If the answer is to the second part, where you want the versatility, say you like to make grits, cream of wheat, maybe you like to crack grains to feed your chickens, or whatever the case may be, then a stone grind mill is for you. Just know that with stone grind mills, you have to adjust the stones every single time pretty much that you're wanting to use it. So especially if you're switching back and forth between those settings, and you kind of have to learn where it's got to be for that. So it's a little bit more of a learning curve. Not difficult at all, but that is the thing, is it just needs a little bit more finesse and finagling each time that you grind. And I even do it, say, even if I'm only ever using it for fine flour, I still check the stones every single time. So a little hack with the harvest here, Miss Nancy. Basically, whenever I'm just wanting the fine flour for bread, I rotate the stones, I turn her on and I rotate the stones until I start to hear a bit of squeaking with the stones. And then I add my grains, and usually that's perfect setting for fine flour. Now, right now, because I actually have Miss Nancy, my stone grind mill, set on the coarser grind that I need for grits, because we do love grits in our house and we consume them pretty regularly. And so I just keep her on that setting, so I don't really have to adjust every time. And the ability for me to go back and forth, save that time, is excellent for me. But do know that I did use the Nutrimill Harvest exclusively for a solid year when we were in the rental, and I couldn't have all my grain mills out, and it was just fine. It did not add hours to my day having to adjust the settings each time. Frankly, it's just more convenient. So there you have it, y'all. If you are still overwhelmed, I still don't know what grain mill to get. Do know, with all the grain mills that I have mentioned here, and I will be linking them all down below for y'all of the places where you can get them, as well as any coupon codes that I may have, description box below. But do know, with any of these brands, Mock Mill, Como Mill, Nutrimill, Wonder Mill, You purchase from these companies, you're really not going to go wrong. They are excellent grain mills that have really stood the test of time. They've been around for quite a while, with the exception of the Impact, but Nutrimel as a company has been around for a while. And so really, you just need to get you a grain mill that's going to get you the grains and the fine flour to start your milling journey and start that baking. So don't stress out too much about it. So there you go, y'all. Let me know in the comments below if you've already purchased your grain mill. Let us know which grain mill you chose and why you chose it and what you love or hate about it to help the other people out who may be looking for a grain mill. That'll be very helpful for our community. And if you already have a grain mill or you're about to get one, I did a video all about maintaining that grain mill to really extend the life of it and just take good care of your investment. You can check that out right here. And as always, I hope that y'all have a wonderful day. I'll see you next week. Bye.
New to milling grains, and possibly are you overwhelmed by all the grain options that you have? Hard red, hard white, soft white, millet, quinoa, camus, einkorn, all the things. So how do you know which grain to now use for the recipe that you are doing? I will be answering this question today, plus sharing some really exciting news coming up in 2024. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, where I teach you all about real whole grains from a biblical perspective. I teach you all about milling that wheat, baking that bread with freshly milled grains, and just consuming that daily bread that Jesus told us to be praying for. So you're new to milling wheat, and if you were baking beforehand, your options were probably just all-purpose flour or bread flour from the store. But now that you're actually milling your grains, you probably have quickly figured out that we have a lot more options, which is wonderful. And that's the beauty of fresh milled grains, but it also leads to some confusion as well. So in this video, it's not going to be an extensive of literally every single grain because that would be ridiculously long, but I will be categorizing basically amongst the actual wheats that we consider in this video. I'll be basically putting these into 4 categories. And again, this is the wheat variety. This is not including any sort of gluten-free grains. And again, not all grains like corn and rice. I'm going to give y'all just an overall view of what is out there, what your options are, what they're good for, and the skill level that I recommend for these particular grains. And I will be telling y'all some of my favorites as well and bonus combinations because yes, you can combine grains for your bread. And also, I will be sharing y'all some exciting news, and this is going to be great news for those of y'all, especially who are wanting to really expand your horizons when it comes to all the grains available to us. But first, let's get started with these 4 categories. First up is what I like to call our hard wheat varieties. These are actually your most common, and most likely, if you bought flour from the store, they're containing one of these 2 grains. And these 2 hard wheats are, you like my fancy labels? We have hard red wheat and hard white wheat. Now these 2 are considered your modern wheat varieties, but they are the best when it comes to your yeast breads. Their gluten structure is perfect to where they're gonna really help that bread to rise, and they are the most common grains, thus they will be some of the cheaper grains. Now, again, I've done a video, if modern wheat kind of scares you, I've done a video explaining that modern wheat is not genetically modified, it has been hybridized, and I have those videos elsewhere if you want to know more. But these are not wheats to be scared of. You can buy them organic, you can buy them straight from the farmer. There are many, many options for these wheats. They're nothing to be scared of. These are the easiest ones too that I recommend to get started with. The hard red, the flavor of that is your typical whole wheaty type flavor. It's going to have that nuttier whole wheat. It's a delicious wheat. And there are many different varieties in that hard red wheat family that you can branch out from. But overall, a hard red wheat is great for a traditional whole wheat loaf. And the hard white is still strong enough to get to do very well for yeast breads, but it's a milder flavor. So if you don't like that whole wheaty type flavor, hard white is the way to go. It is going to give you a whiter type bread, where a hard red is going to be a bit more brown. I don't know if you can even see, but a hard red wheat berry does have a reddish brown tint to it, where the hard white has a whiter tint to it as well. But either way, both of these are really great. They are excellent for beginners. And hard wheats you want for more of your yeast breads, not your baked goods, your lighter baked goods such as cookies, cakes. These are not really going to be the wheat that you're wanting to use for those. But you can use these for non-yeast breads. They work great in muffins, go great in your bread machine. From personal experience, if you have a bread machine, hard red tends to do the best in the bread machine, at least with my recipe. But you can use them for muffins, for pancakes, for waffles. You can use them for those flatbreads. Now your hard white, I definitely recommend if you like those French breads, French bread, baguette. So they're still yeast breads, but they are known for their milder flavor. And that is where your hard white really comes in handy. So I definitely recommend, if you can, to keep both on hand, because you're gonna want a different flavor depending on your bread, especially when it comes to your yeast breads. But either way, these are excellent wheats for your beginners and all skill levels. Now, one last thing to say about the hard wheats is you will start finding, if you start looking, some people like to distinguish between hard, say red or white, winter wheat, hard, red or white, spring wheat. Personally, I never pay attention to these. I don't really worry about it. Some of the deep artisanal bread people swear by a difference, but in just general bread breaking for me, keep it simple. I really have not noticed either way. A hard red is a hard red and a hard white is a hard white in my brain. Next category is our soft wheats. Now, I only have one here because I've recently discovered that there is another one. The main one that you know of is soft white wheat. If you have purchased flour from the store, if you've ever purchased Lily's flour, turn it around. It's the only flour that I personally have noticed in the flour aisle that uses a soft white wheat berry. All the other ones, all-purpose or bread flours, are usually using a hard red wheat. But your soft wheats are perfect for those lighter baked goods that you love, your cookies, your cakes, and of course your biscuits. So again, your soft white wheat, again, an easy wheat. It is still considered one of your modern type wheats, but it is a very easy wheat to work on. I highly recommend that you start off with it as a beginner, because you're going to want a wheat that works with your cookies and your cakes, where a hard wheat just kind of won't work there. It can also be used for your muffins, your pancakes, your cornbread, flatbreads, tortillas, those type of things. So it's still being a soft white wheat. It is a milder flavor. And I find that whenever you mill a soft white wheat, that it's the closest looking to all-purpose flour. It mills very, very fine, and it's a very white flour. So don't be freaked out. The germ in the bran is still in there, but it is just a lighter, fluffier flour. Now, one that I have discovered since then is they do have a soft red wheat. I've actually never tried it personally, but being a soft wheat, it's still a high moisture, low protein grain that can still probably be used for your cookies and cakes. I personally have never tried it. Not many people actually sell it. So if you have tried a soft red wheat, comment below so we can all know what it's like. It's like one of the few grains that I've never tried. Like, what's wrong with me? So again, soft wheats, I only have the soft white, but there is a soft red as well. If you got to choose, I would go with a soft white wheat because that's what I'm most familiar with. But another one that is great for all skill levels, and it needs to be just one of the basic wheats that you have in your pantry. Next category is the one with the biggest buzzword, and that is ancient grains. Now, it may surprise you that a lot of grains that you're familiar with are actually ancient grains, meaning they've been around for time immemorial, basically. We are still harvesting them today. They are varieties that have been found in skeletons that they have dug up from thousands of years ago. Many of these can be traced back to, shortly after the fall, whenever men were farmers, and we have been farming wheat ever since, basically. But ancient grains is one of those where many people like ancient grains, hearing that they are healthier, so on and so forth. Honestly, just mill your wheat. Consume 100% freshly milled wheat, and that is what's going to be good for you. But that's a whole other video. All right, so what are ancient grains? Now, again, there are many ancient grains that are not in the wheat family. So just to stick with the wheat family, they include ones like emmer, which is one of your oldest wheat varieties. We also have spelt, rye, barley, einkorn, and camus. So many of these you've probably heard of, especially einkorn, thanks to Jovial Foods making that very popular. Now, with them being ancient grains, they are not grown as much as the hard wheats and the soft wheats. And so these tend to be more expensive. Now, I will say, as far as ancient grains, spelt is one of your cheaper ancient grains, but contrast that to things like emmer or camus, which can be quite pricey because it's just supply and demand. Not many people grow them. Another thing about ancient grains is that they are generally not as strong in the gluten department to be able to make those tall yeast, fluffy yeast sandwich type breads all on their own. If you're wanting to use ancient grains for your yeast breads, I do recommend mixing them with a hard wheat to really help that gluten structure, which we'll get to in a bit. Now, they are great. Many of these are wonderful for flatbread, so your tortillas, your pitas. If you kind of notice, a lot of ancient cultures have flatbreads because they are way easier than, say, doing a sourdough. And so I do believe that that's why many cultures, their bread is some sort of flatbread for this reason. So these all make most of them make excellent flatbreads, pizza crust, tortillas, pita breads, those type of breads. Many of these can also be used for your quick breads like muffins, pancakes, and waffles. Now, for grains like barley and rye, yes, those are actually ancient grains that you may be more familiar with. Barley is one of those that is mentioned by name in the Bible. And barley, it's used for things like specialty breads like barley bread, but it's combined with regular flours. Same thing with rye. Rye is good for our rye breads and our pumpernickel, but it too is combined with a regular wheat flour for those breads. I actually do not really recommend all of these ancient grains for beginners because ones especially like camus and einkorn, they just act weird, especially freshly milled camus and freshly milled einkorn. They tend to be way stickier. You're gonna find that you almost have some mess that you're not even sure what to do with. It can be done, but that's why I don't recommend them for beginners. Get some experience under your belt first before diving into these ancient grains. Now, with that being said, my favorite rolls are actually camus rolls. It has all camus in it, and I find that they are the lightest, just amazing rolls, very similar to, those little rolls that Chick-fil-A serves for breakfast, those little chicken biscuit things, very, very close to that. So that is my favorite, but again, it acts weird and I can do it no problem because I have a lot of experience. So just be aware of that. Don't be scared of them, but just be aware that many of these ancient grains act differently. Now, before we get into our fourth category, an exciting announcement. First of all, this video is actually sponsored by the Grainy Bunch. That is the membership group of elite supporters for Grains and Grit. It is an amazing membership community that we do have. They are my brain trust. We have, not only do they get exclusive recipes in a portal on my website, but we have live hangouts every month. They get extra content, bonus content, but most importantly, we have a private group on MeWe just for my grainies that we can bounce ideas off, and people share their recipes, they ask questions. You get the priority my grainies get the priority when it comes to asking me questions. But some amazing recipes are being shared in the MeWe group, like this one by Chris, who shared a sourdough multi-grain Italian bread loaf. And can I just say mad kudos to the scoring here. This is a beautiful loaf, and he so graciously shared that recipe, and it's just wonderful. And there are other great ideas too, because I'm not the only one. I don't know everything, y'all. And so it's a wonderful, wonderful community. But with the Grainy Bunch, exciting news for 2024 coming is if you love all of these grains and you want to know more about rye and barley and camus and einkorn, I am launching in 2024 the Grains Explorer Challenge, where every month we're going to be focused on a specific grain. I will be talking about that every month on YouTube. There will be a specific video here on this channel on YouTube for the specific grain of that month. But for the full adventure, that is actually for my grainy bunch. So you're going to want to sign up for the grainy bunch so you don't miss out, because with that, they're going to be getting bonus recipes, including extra video of how to make a whole meal of that grain and so much more. So check out this challenge. And you can join it at any time during the year, depending on whenever you see this video. Just go to grainsandgrit.com/grainsexplorer. I'll have the link here below for the information and to sign up for the grainy bunch so you can take in the full adventure of this Grains Explorer challenge. Last but not least, the fourth category, my own category of wheat grains. This I kind of labeled as a specialty category because it contains this one single wheat here, and that is wheat durum. It kind of was in its own category because all that wheat durum is really used for is pasta. And no, I don't have any videos about pasta yet as of this video. I got to get that out. It's on the list. But wheat durum is typically used for pasta. So whenever you buy pasta from the store, it generally says semolina on the back, which is sifted wheat durum. So it's wheat durum that has had the bran and the germ removed to give us that white pasta. So this is something to have on hand if you're wanting to do pasta. You can do it with other wheats, but when you're looking and you're wondering what is wheat durum, it's just what's used for pasta. So it's in the wheat family, but in its own special category. So unless you're really wanting to dive into pasta with freshly milled wheat, not necessarily one that I recommend you must have in your pantry, but mental note to self, keep in mind. Okay, so that's the four categories that I personally would categorize the different wheat varieties in. I'm pretty sure I didn't miss one, but if I did, let me know in the comments below and I will tell you what I recommend using it for and all the things. But I'm pretty sure I got them. I had to go through all of my grains to see what all I had. But let us conclude with what are my favorites. Do know these are not all the grains that I have in my pantry. I do have a bit of an obsession, but I have been milling for about over a decade now, and certain grains have become my favorites, or I would say some are my staples. My absolute favorite sometimes changes, but ultimately my staples, my ride or die, the ones that I have to have on hand at all times is definitely my hard red, my hard white, and my soft white. That's my base, and I recommend every one of you have that as your base as well, because you can pretty much make anything with those three wheat varieties. So those are the ones that I make sure I have the most in stock. I use the most, those type of things. Now, branching out, some of my favorite combinations actually is for a yeast bread, 50% hard red, 50% hard white is really delicious. Another one is about 2 parts hard red wheat and 1 part spelt. That is a way to incorporate an ancient grain, and that can be used for a yeast bread, but it's just a really delicious flavor. Now, my ultimate favorite grain right now that I'm really enjoying using is actually camu. I made camu tortillas the other day that were perfection. I also love them in my rolls. It's now my go-to grain for rolls is camu. It's my ride or die right now when it comes to rolls. But otherwise, so many of these grains are wonderful. And again, that's the beauty of milling your own grains and actually doing it the way that God created, because God is truly the author of actual diversity. The world says that it loves diversity. It really doesn't. And you can see that especially in our food, because we tend to stick to 1 or 2 varieties when it comes to a food, when really there are so many varieties that God has created for us to enjoy. So hopefully you will really dive into this and get excited as I am. But the bottom line is, if you're really wanting to expand your horizons, check out our Grains Explorer Challenge for 2024. And we're going to be getting into grains that some of them you've never even seen on this channel. They're going to be challenging for me, some that I've never even tried. So again, grainsandgrit.com/grainsexplorer to check out the details there and to sign up for the Grainy Bunch if you want the full adventure. Thank y'all very much to my grainies out there. Be sure to comment below if you're one of my grainies. You know I love you. And as always, Hope this video was helpful, and I'll see y'all next week. Bye.
How should you store grains? What is the best way to be storing grains? There are so many answers to this question, but we're going to be talking about this on this video today, and I'm going to go ahead and give you a heads up. It's not as complicated as you think. Hey y'all, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel, you guessed it, we talk all things real whole grains from a biblical perspective. I teach you how to be milling your wheat, your other grains, consuming whole grains, baking bread, so on and so forth. Now, a little background about me. I have been doing this for over a decade, which means I have been storing grains in bulk for over a decade. And I've definitely learned a thing or two about it. So I'm gonna be giving y'all my tips that are tried, tested, and true. Because trust me, I have learned, and I have stored a ton of grains throughout these years. And frankly, I've only ever had 2 buckets go bad, and I'll explain to you why later. So in this video, I'm gonna be covering 3 things. 1, how to store your grains. Easy peasy, simple. Number 2, the slight exceptions. There are 3 grains that are a bit more tricky, or just things to look out for when it comes to storing your grains, especially long term. And number 3, I'm gonna get into kind of my favorite things to use and have on hand when it comes to storing grains. That's really gonna make your life a whole lot easier. All right, so first of all, how to be storing the grains. So like I said, a little bit of background. I've been doing this for over a decade. I live in the state of Florida, and I have the whole time native Floridian, and it gets extremely stupid hot and crazy stupid humid here. Okay, so moisture is definitely a big deal. Now, there are 2 big enemies when it comes to your grains, and that is moisture and that is pest. So basically, all that you need to do in order to store grains is you just need to make sure that you're keeping out the moisture and you're keeping out the pest. And basically all that really involves is just a good container with a good lid that keeps out your moisture and your pest. Now, as you may notice, if you watched other videos, I'm in a different location. I'm actually out here in my shed. And as I stated, I'm in Florida, and I actually store my grains, all of them, in an uninsulated shed outside. So this is, there's no air conditioning in here. This is not a temperature controlled environment. I mean, it's just shed. Okay. My wonderful husband built me these sturdy shelves. So you definitely need sturdy shelves when it comes to grains. And I've never had grains go bad, except 2 exceptions, but we'll get to that later. And this is where my grains are stored. I have even stored grains completely outside. Long ago, when we started our homesteading journey, I had an outdoor kitchen. My grains were stored outside. Now, they were under just a simple awning like you see at farmers markets, and then it was underneath like a table that was built for me, that my husband built for me. But otherwise, when it rained, like water would actually kind of sprinkle a little bit onto the buckets. If it was a downpour, I would even have water on top of my lids. And I never once had those grains go bad because I had really good buckets with really good lids that kept out the bugs, the pest, and the moisture. And so I've even had it in more extreme conditions, and my grains did not go bad. So I know you might see, oh, I need Mylar bags or oxygen absorbers. You do not need those items. If you want to use them, fine. They're not going to hurt your grains, but they're definitely not needed. And there's nothing wrong with throwing especially oxygen absorbers in, because the point of oxygen absorbers is they remove the oxygen so no bugs can live in there, because that's another concern that you do have with your grains is sometimes, you know, they might have little mites inside of them and they may hatch, and then you have bugs in your grains. Now, I've never experienced that with any of the wheat type grains. I've only experienced that with 3 type of grains that are an issue, but we'll get to that later. So again, you just really need a good bucket. So food grade safe bucket. This one you see is from 4 Generations Organic Farms. It already comes in a food grade safe bucket with a good lid. If you are buying your grains in bags, you need to, whenever you receive those, put them in buckets. Do not, or glass jars or whatever it is you put them in. Don't keep them in your bags, because those bags, pests can get in them very easily, and so can moisture. That's pretty much all you need. Good container, good lid. keeps out the moisture and the pest. All right, so let's get to point number 2. And that is there are 3 slight exceptions to this. There are 3 grains that you need to know about that need a little bit more finesse when it comes to storing them. And these 3 grains are corn, brown rice, and oat groats. Now, the reason that these are a bit different is because most of these have the oils more on the outside, or they're a bit more starchy of a grain. And so corn and rice, I treat them the same. With corn and with rice, I actually used to just freeze them for 24 hours and then just immediately from the freezer, I just then dump them into whatever container, like the good bucket, good lid that I'm storing it in. And I've never had a problem. The reason why I froze them is because corn and rice and the brown rice are starchier grains, and they're more likely to have those little mite bugs hatch and your grains become buggy. No bueno. Extra source of protein. You're not going to die if you eat them, but you probably don't want to. You probably don't want to. And so that's the exceptions there. And it's just the type of grains that they are. Now, I actually don't freeze them anymore. I actually just throw in oxygen absorbers, and it does the same thing. So as long as, there's no oxygen, the bugs cannot thrive with no oxygen. Now, be mindful when it comes to oxygen absorbers, if it is in a bucket that you are opening and closing, opening and closing, check your oxygen absorbers each time to make sure that they're still good. So if your oxygen absorbers ever are hard, they're not good anymore. You need to replace them, and you definitely want to do so. When it comes to oxygen absorbers, also make sure that you are getting the right size for the container that you have. So there's a difference between 1 gallon size and a 5 gallon size. And I'll be linking below great sources for those oxygen absorbers if you want to do that, or if you just prefer to freeze them beforehand, and then you'll be good. So corn is actually one of the times that I've actually had bugs hatch in them and I lost a whole bucket of corn. And that is because I did not prepare them. I didn't freeze them. They had no oxygen absorbers. It was a bucket that it was actually sitting in my house for over a year, and the bugs hatched. So learn from my mistakes. It will happen if they're stored long-term. If you're going to be using that corn up in maybe a month or 2, you're probably going to be fine. But for me, I store in bulk, and I didn't touch that bucket for over a year. And so that was the only time that I've ever had the bugs hatch in grains, is because I just did not prep it right for corn. We'll go ahead and talk about the second time that I've ever had a bucket go bad. It was some sort of wheat grain, and that's only because we were moving and the people that were helping us move cracked one of my lids on my buckets, and I did not know about it until about a month later. I went to access, it was actually one of a gamma lid, which we'll talk later, but it cracked the rim of it, which allowed moisture to get into the bucket, and the grain was ruined. So that's the importance of keeping moisture out, is because it will ruin your grains. And those are the only 2 times that I've ever lost grains. Now, again, so corn and rice, I treat the same. I either freeze them for 24 hours, then store them in buckets, or I use oxygen absorbers. The third grain is oat groats. Now, oat groats, what you need to look for is it actually starts with what you buy. And so if you look at most places that sell oat groats, like Pleasant Hill Grain or Azure Standard, and oat groats are the whole oats before they're rolled or cut or anything like that. They look like wheat berries. And most of those places will say that they have stabilized the oats. You want to buy stabilized oat groats. And what this means is that basically they have very, very lightly toasted the oat groats, because what it does is oats have the oils on the outside that would have them go rancid a lot faster than if you just lightly toasted them. And then that stabilizes those oats to be able to be stored longer. Now, this does mean that these oats you cannot use for sprouting. They're not going to sprout because of this process. But as far as the nutritional value goes, you still get the great beneficial nutrition with the oats, even though they have been stabilized. So that's the biggest thing with oat groats that you want to look for, is make sure that you're buying them where they say that they're stabilized for long-term storage. All right, so before we get to point number three. Let's talk about today's sponsor, and that is 4 Generations Organic Farms. So I love 4 Generations Organic Farms. They are an excellent source of my organic hard red and hard white wheat berries, along with some others. So right now they are my go-to. Hard red, which is their Butler's Gold, and their Stardust, which is their hard white. Those are my go-to hard red and hard white grains. They do absolutely wonderful, perfect for newbie bakers, very easy to work with. And another thing is I love about 4 Generations is that I'm buying directly from the farmer. They are organic farmers that have been around, well, 4 generations since the late 1800s in Oklahoma. So they are USA grown wheat berries that you can get. They're shipped straight to your house, reasonably priced, and they're organically grown, which means that they're taking care of their soil, regenerative farm practices, no GMOs, no crazy pesticides, definitely no glyphosate, nothing crazy like that. And so they're also taking care of their soil for that 5th generation that I'm hoping to come around. So if you haven't checked them out, be sure to just go to grainsandgrit.com/4generations. Use coupon code grainsandgrit for 10% off your first order. Tell them I sent you, and good news is their grains already come very well sealed and with oxygen absorbers in it already. So already doing well when it comes to storing them long term. Okay, so let's get to number 3. And there are 2 tools that are my favorite and definitely makes the job easier when it comes to storing grains. So the first one that you're gonna want are these bucket openers, and I will link these below. I actually have like more than one. I have them on a nail right on the side of my shelving here in my shed, so they're easily accessible, because whenever you get these buckets, y'all, let me tell you, they are hard to open, and these make it so much easier to open. So definitely you're gonna want, you need bucket openers. It will save your sanity, and you are welcome. So this also helps because like for this bucket right here for 4 Generations, you can put the lid back on. You can reuse the lid, but it's so tight, which is good. Like you want it to be tight to keep out the pests and the moisture, but this is gonna save your sanity and really makes it so much easier. The second wonderful tool, whoever invented it, God bless you, are gamma lids. So these are wonderful screw top lids that you can purchase. And again, I'll link these down below. So if you are definitely storing in buckets like this, whether you are buying already in buckets or in bags, and then you put them in here, these lids make it so much easier because you actually don't need this. Now, I still recommend this too when you first get into your buckets. You still want this tool, but the gamma lids make it so much easier because once you install the rim, then the lids, it's just a screw on. You just screw it on and screw it off, and makes it easy peasy to get in and out of your buckets. Now, one thing you need to know, these lids are not removable. Okay, trust me. I have tried removing gamma lids off of buckets, the rims that go on. I have tried removing those from buckets. It ain't gonna happen. Okay, so make sure you put it on a bucket that you can reuse over and over again. Now that I've kind of reorganized my grains, I'm wanting to get some more gamma lids. And what I'm gonna do is even the grains that already come in buckets, I'm gonna just dump into the bucket with the gamma lid and just reuse that over and over again, because it's just so much easier when you are accessing your grains over and over again. Now, a little bonus information about how I actually store all my grains, what my system is. I didn't say this at the beginning, but I figured I'd give you a little bonus moment here. So what I actually do, how it works at my house, is I have my bulk grains out here in my shed. These are the ones that are stored in the buckets. Inside my house, I do actually have a milling station, and my wonderful husband, again, because he loves me, built me very, very, very sturdy shelves where I actually have pretty much all my grains that are out here in my shed. They are represented inside in gallon or half-gallon size glass jars. So whether they're mason jars or jars that you get from Azure Standard or whatever it is. And so they're in glass jars inside my house. So whenever I'm wanting to mill something, I'm not having to always come out here to, get the amount of grains and then go back into my house. I keep some in the house so I can quickly mill something and then just refill those as needed. So there you go, y'all. Easy peasy way to store grains. Hopefully this was helpful. Be sure to check out 4 Generations Organic Farms if you are needing to stock up on some grains. And if y'all have any questions, list them below and I will be sure to answer them. And if you're needing to know just a simple yeast bread loaf recipe because you might be a newbie, then be sure to check out this video here. Easy peasy recipe for your grains that you have now stored. And as always, I hope y'all have a wonderful day and I'll see you next week. Bye.
It's bread baking day, so in this video, let me show you how I bake bread with 100% freshly milled wheat. Hey everyone, welcome back to Grains and Grit, where we talk about all things real whole grains from a biblical perspective. It's actually been 2 years since I posted my very first video, which actually was my simple yeast bread loaf recipe using 100% freshly milled wheat. And so I figured it was time for an update. So as I'm baking bread today, I'm going to be showing you guys how I'm doing it these days. Good news, my actual recipe has not changed, but I have tweaked a little bit of the size that I do, things like that. So do know that this printable recipe is still available on my website, and it will be in the description box below so you can print it out. If you're already familiar with this recipe, then feel free to bake along with me. So let's get started. So of course, first off, we got to select some wheat berries today. Don't be jealous of my fancy schmancy Post-it note labels. So my favorite combination at the moment is actually half hard red wheat, half hard white wheat. However, bottom line is you need a hard wheat berry. You can use all hard red, you can use all hard white, and if you're starting out, start with these 2 grains. They're the easiest to deal with. So we're gonna grab both of these and get to milling. All right, so we have our wheat, and this is, for anyone who's been along for any length of time, is Miss Betsy Bosch. I love her so much. This is a Bosch Universal Mixer. Another thing to point out about my recipe is people often ask me, do you have, a recipe for 1 loaf? I don't need as much. And I actually do, and that's in my ingredients quick sheet that you can grab. It's completely free. It's my little cheat sheet that I have. It not only has the ingredients for 1 loaf, 2 loaf, or 3 loaves, but it also has my most used recipes. So be sure to grab that because that'll be the easiest reference to know if you're only wanting 1 loaf. Whether, again, you're using a mixer, kneading by hand, the steps are the same. And do know I have a video all about kneading by hand for you guys. I'll link that below. But with our Bosch Universal Mixer, I do have the dough hook and the little, I think it's called dough hook extender that we have here. And our first step is actually very simple. We're going to take our freshly milled wheat and we're just going to create basically, not a proof, not a levain. I guess it's kind of like a levain, but bottom line, we're going to put some of our flour in here with all of our yeast, all of our water, let it sit, get that yeast going and activated. That's really going to help give your bread a boost when it comes to the rising time. So for this, the total amount of flour that we're going to be needing is anywhere from 9 to 9.5 cups of flour. That is about 6 cups of wheat berries that you will be milling. Now, this is not an exact science with freshly milled wheat. You may find that you need more or less flour depending on the day. If it's humid, if it's cold, if it's raining, things like those type of issues with the weather that can affect your bread. And this is why I do not weigh my ingredients. I just measure them and it works out fine. And you'll see what I mean later on when we're into the kneading section. But for now, no matter what the weather is, we're going to do, I like to put for this one, 3 cups of flour in here. It doesn't have to be exact. If it's a little over, that's totally fine. 3 cups of flour. And then we're adding 2.25 tablespoons of instant yeast. I do prefer instant yeast. You can use active yeast, but if you're using active yeast, this proofing process is a must do. You have to do what I'm doing here to get that yeast activated. Otherwise, with instant yeast, you technically can skip this step, but I don't like it. All right, and then we have 3 3/4 cups of warm water. And so let's mix this up real quick. And now we're just gonna let it sit for about 10 to 15 minutes. All right, so here we have it after about 15 minutes. So you see that it is a little bit bubbly. You can't really tell on video, but it has actually risen a bit as well. And that's what we're looking for. So now we just need to add the rest of our ingredients. Remember, we've already put 3 cups of flour in here. We've got our yeast and we've got our water. Now we need to add the rest of our flour that's needed, our salt, and our honey and oil. So this is our 1/2 cup oil, 1/2 cup of honey, and then we're adding our 3 1/4 teaspoon salt. This is Redmond salt, my favorite salt. And now here's where we add our flour. Now, key to this, whether you're kneading by hand or by a mixer, the recipe calls for 9 to 9.5 cups of flour. You do not want to just dump in all of that flour. With all-purpose flour, you generally can do that. You can't do that with freshly milled wheat because you could end up with too much flour or not enough. So what I like to do is, if the recipe calls, in this case, for 9 to 9.5 cups of flour, I'm going to now add a total of 8 cups of flour in here. Start kneading and mixing it together, and we're going to be going from there. So we already have 3 in. So this is 4, 5, and 8. And then, very important, putting the lid on, trust me. And then let's start mixing this up. Just want to show you guys here. Now in the mixer, or again, by hand, this is crucial. And I think this is where some people get either too dense of a bread, not turning out. In our mixer, where I'm going to want to add enough flour to where it just starts to pull off the bowl. And this is pretty much the same if you're kneading by hand. But from here, I do not measure my flour. I generally just add 1/4 at a time until it is good. And that's what you're looking for. So again, at this point, you don't want to be so obsessed with the measurements. Just start adding a little bit at a time until it starts getting to that point. And one thing to add is, with a mixer and by hand, add a 1/4 cup at a time and then wait a little bit. Let it get incorporated before just continually adding more in. So I usually wait a good 15-20 seconds. I don't count, just to make sure that it's going in before adding more. All right, that is definitely good where it's starting to pull off the bowl. I don't bother scraping this down because with the kneading process, it's going to eventually get all of this as well. And now in my Bosch, we knead for about I set the timer and I knead this for 9 minutes. If you are kneading by hand, you're going to need maybe 15 to 20 minutes, and you'll start noticing that. See how right now it looks, it's not smooth looking at all. It's going to easily break apart. We're now looking for it when it looks smooth, and when it's ready, we'll go from there for other tips. So I'll see you back here in 9 minutes. So here we are after 9 minutes. It comes up a little bit. One thing I forgot to mention is the kneading speed that I was kneading this at. It was just at the 1 setting. That's more than enough for what I need. So here we go with our dough. And what you're looking for, and this is something that is so difficult to communicate on camera, is I'm wanting a soft dough. And with my dough, I actually like it to be slightly sticky. And your dough will feel slightly different depending on the wheat that you have been using. But bottom line is, that's a good dough. It is pliable. I can work with it. Let's actually get it out of here. On a large surface, it can be a large cutting board. I just like to sprinkle a little bit of the freshly milled flour that I have left over. If you notice the bowl, it's pretty clean, and that's a good sign that I added enough flour. It's not too sticky, too doughy. And this is actually really good. Sometimes if I'm going to err on one side, it is going to be to have a bit more of a sticky dough, because you can always add flour. You can't take it away. So it is just, especially if I start getting in the middle, you can see it is just slightly sticky where it's sticking to my hands. If you've kneaded it and it's still really, really sticky, no problem. Just add some flour into your hands, rub it, and then start gently working the dough. And it's pulling dough from here, flour from here as well, until it gets to where basically
you can work with it. Even though it's slightly sticky, I can still work with this dough. I do not want to add too much flour because my bread will be too dense. So now we have a big clump of dough and all the possibilities. Again, my original recipe, this is enough to make 2 2-pound loaves, but I'm actually no longer doing that anymore. I actually now make 3 smaller loaves with these. Now again, to be perfect, you could weigh the dough balls to get an even amount to make sure your loaves turn out well, which I do, especially if I'm selling the bread and I want it to look prettier. But I have enough experience where I'm just gonna eyeball it. And from this, we're getting 3 loaves. And these loaves are gonna be a bit over 1 pound loaves. If I remember right, when I weigh these, they're usually around like 1 pound, 8, 9, 10 ounces each, roughly. We have our dough now. So let's set it aside and start working one at a time. And this is also an important step, the shaping process. If I need to, I add a little bit of flour down to it, and now we shape it. Love these these are called a pastry roller, and we're gonna roll it out into a rectangle. This I'm rolling out to about like half an inch, 3/4 of an inch thick. It doesn't matter really too much, but you do want it rolled out enough that you can work. Okay, folding. One side, you pull out a little bit and you bring it in. And then the other side, stretch it out a little bit, roll it over. And then you start at one end and you pull a little bit, roll. Pull back a little bit, roll. Pull back a little bit, roll. Pull back a little bit and roll. And now you have a weird jelly donut type shape. And now you just kind of smooth this over a bit. Okay. And this just takes a little practice. I find that it helps to have it on a counter where you can kind of pull a bit here. Okay, and you're wanting a nice loaf shape. And I keep working at it, tucking it under where the sides are fairly smooth, that's not fairly smooth. So I want to kind of work at it a little bit more. And I definitely want my top to be smooth because if I find that I already have like a rip or something at the top, it's gonna rip the bread coming out. Now, not a big deal for my family, still edible, still good, but you know, if I'm selling it, it doesn't look quite as pretty. And that right there looks pretty good. The sides look good, the bottom a little ugly. That's what we want. And then we place it gently into our pan. Now let's do some more. Here we go. Now you just cover it up. This is a beautiful tea towel, huge tea towel, 100% cotton, I believe. One of my followers gave to me who lives local, Miss Phyllis. Hey. So bottom line is you just want to cover it with something light. Don't do a heavy dish towel that will weigh your bread down. So if you have baby receiving blankets, those are awesome. Or the flour sack cloths. I like to actually keep the dough on top of my oven while we preheat the oven to 350 degrees. And this bread with the instant yeast will be risen in about 30-35 minutes. And I only do 1 rise. That's why I love this recipe. It is shorter, it is quicker than others, but the results are wonderful. Okay, it has been about 30-35 minutes and you can see these have risen beautifully. You want it about an inch above the pan. Obviously the middle one rose more. It was a bigger bit of dough, but this looks good. Now just make sure you don't rise it too much because it is going to continue rising in the oven. So now let's get these bad boys in the oven, 350 degrees, and bake for 35 minutes. And here we are after 35 minutes. They are looking absolutely beautiful. So we're going to pull them out and let them rest in the pans for 10 minutes. All right, so it's been about 10 minutes. So we are putting our loaves on cooling racks because if you keep them in the pan, they will get a little moist.
So we're gonna carefully dump here. Let's just look at these loaves so you can see they're nice and tall, but not too ginormous. This one's my largest one that you can see. Let me kind of do it here, but they look beautiful. This is one that I actually purposely left a little split on the side where it wasn't completely smooth, and you can see this is what happens if it's not completely smooth, but not the end of the world. So now the difficult part where we have to let them cool. Now you don't have to let them cool, but just be aware that if you go ahead and slice into them hot, that it will cause your loaf to deflate a little bit. So I've done it before, push comes to shove, and I needed to do that, and that's fine. I like to cool them on their side, one, because Julia Child said so, and two, it does keep your bread from kind of decompressing. And cover them up again, and I will be back here when these are completely cool. And now the time has come. They are cooled down, and now time to slice to see what it looks like on the inside. So you can see the outside looks great. Now let's check the inside. And this is my Cutco bread knife. It's a great little bread knife that I found at a flea market. And so it will be easier to slice the next day. But as you can see, it slices very well. And on the inside, it is nice and soft. There are no huge holes or anything. This is not the bread where we want the holes. And now to prove no holes, let's cut in the middle of the bread to see what it looks like. And as you can see, there are no gaping holes in the middle of the loaf as well, which is where usually you will find the big holes. And here's also a slice. I can get it thinner usually the next day, but just to give you an idea of a slice. As always, I hope that this was a helpful recipe for y'all, especially to you newbies. And as always, I will talk to y'all next week. Bye. You've milled your wheat, and now you have freshly milled flour. And in this moment, some questions may be popping into your brain besides, what can I do with this? Questions like, can I freeze this? How long will this flour last? What if I milled too much flour? How much wheat berries does it take to mill into flour? Today, I'm going to be addressing many of these common questions I get about freshly milled flour. Hey everyone, welcome back to Grains and Grit. My name is Felicia, and on this channel, you know we talk about all things real whole grains from a biblical perspective. So as I stated, I'm going to be answering some common questions that I get about the actual flour part when you've milled your grains and now you have this flour. And these are questions besides, what recipes to use. So some of the common questions that I get that I'm going to be addressing in this video is, when can I mill my flour / how far in advance can I mill it to bake with it? What happens if I have leftover flour? What can I do with it? Do you need to allow your flour to cool before baking? And of course, how long does freshly milled flour actually last? So let's dive in and get started. So the first one, and I get this, is how far in advance can I mill my flour? Can I store it to bake on another day? Things like that. And the simple answer to this question is, you mill your wheat berries into flour right before you're ready to bake with it. There are a couple exceptions to this, and I'll get to that in a minute. But the main reason that we want to mill our wheat fresh and use it is so that we can take advantage of all of the nutrients that are in the wheat berry. They have been locked inside that wheat berry, and they are still in that wheat berry until it has been cracked open or sprouted in some capacity. The biggest nutrient that is pretty much lost almost immediately is vitamin E, which is absolutely crucial to have, especially because wheat is the king of vitamin E. That germ, the wheat germ, contains the most vitamin E than any other food. It completely blows it out of the water. But vitamin E is one of those nutrients that are oxidized right off the bat very, very quickly. So according to Sue Becker's numbers, I've listened to a talk with her before, and if you've listened to her, you've probably heard these numbers too. But basically by day one of milling the wheat, of turning those wheat berries into flour, by the end of day one, 45% of the nutrients have been oxidized. And again, this is mainly vitamin E. Not all nutrients oxidize, but you do have many that do. And by just the end of day 1, 45% is gone, lost forever. You're not getting it back. By day 3, 90% is completely lost and gone. The biggest reason, again, is you mill it when you're ready to use it. Now, there are 2 exceptions to this. One being, and again, I would like to emphasize these are exceptions, meaning you are not doing them all the time. They are exceptions to this. And that is the only time that I will mill my flour in advance is, say I want to make muffins or pancakes or something on for breakfast one morning. This is especially on Sunday mornings where I may want to sleep in a little bit, or those type of things. Or the biggest thing is I don't want to wake up the whole house by turning on my grain mill. Many times I will actually mill the flour the night before, so that way I already have the flour ready to go by the next morning that I can use, and I just keep it in my fridge to slow down that oxidation process. But again, this is not all the time. This is not my everyday bread baking or anything like that. These are exceptions. So that's one thing that you certainly can do, but just know, and I'm aware, that certain nutrients are starting to be lost a little bit. But every now and then, it's okay. The second exception is if you're making pie crust. Now, this is not a huge exception, but whenever you're making pie crust, if you've seen my videos, all of your ingredients need to be cold. And so I do not recommend taking your freshly milled grains because they are a little heated, they are warm, and then immediately making pie crust with it because it's gonna mess with your fats. So I actually do recommend either throwing it in the freezer to quickly cool down, or in your fridge if you're making it later that day or something like that, to basically get it cool and cold to help you with the pie crust. But again, those are the only 2 exceptions. Do not mill on Monday in order to bake bread on Saturday. That is not recommended at all. All right, so that answers question number 1. Question number 2 is one that I get often, and that is what to do with leftover flour. Many times when you mill and you end up not having exactly the amount of flour that you need, there are times where you have leftover flour, and what to do with that, because we don't want to waste it. First and foremost, and this will take practice and you will learn as you go, is to actually try to mill what you need for whatever recipe you're baking. And a general rule of thumb to remember is 1 cup of wheat berries equals about 1.5 cups of flour. This will vary a little bit depending on what wheat berries you're using, but that is a general rule. So whenever I see, 9.5 cups of flour needed for a recipe, I generally know, okay, probably need to stick with 6 cups of grains. At least start with that. You can always mill a little more. That's totally fine. But that's a general rule, and try to just mill what you need. Don't go overboard with it. Now, I usually do have a little bit of flour left over, and there are 2 things that I do with it. One is that I usually keep a Ziploc bag in my freezer of any leftover flour. Now, when I say leftover flour, I rarely have more than 1 cup of flour left over. Usually it's less than that. I'm pretty good about getting it pretty much down, using all of it, even for dusting and things like that. But whenever I do have some flour left over, I actually keep a bag and I throw that flour into the Ziploc bag and put it in my freezer. And that flour I actually use for those times where I may only need 1 or 2 tablespoons of flour, maybe a 1/4 cup of flour. These are like when I'm making my gravies or when a recipe calls for just a little bit of flour and I'm not wanting to go mill wheat for 1 tablespoon of flour. That is a perfect time that I just go in and scoop whatever I need out and use it. So very handy to have for those times when you just need just a little bit, or say you get to whenever you're baking your current recipe and you find that you were just a little bit short of flour. Instead of going to mill some more, you can pull from that stash as well. So that's the first thing I do with it, is just keep a little Ziploc bag in the freezer. Use it for those times when you just need a little bit of flour. The second thing that I do with it is because, this does not apply to everyone, but I am usually baking something every single day, nearly every single day. And so sometimes I just save that little bit of flour and I use it the next time I do some baking. I just add it in to that recipe. Again, it's not a lot. I'm not talking like 6 cups of flour, maybe half a cup or a cup, maybe a cup and a half of flour. That's not the great bulk of the recipe that I'm using. And so I usually just keep it in the bowl and use it the next time. But again, I'm generally baking every day or every other day. So those are some ideas for when you have leftover flour. Question number 3 is, do you need to allow your flour to cool down before baking? And this one I get, I think, especially from people who are bakers and they're switching to freshly milled wheat and they immediately notice, wow, this flour is warmer than store-bought flour, which is obviously true. It's just been through a lot of friction there. So generally speaking, no, you do not need to cool it down before baking. Again, these breads, especially for yeast breads, you're wanting it in a warm environment anyway for yeast. So it's perfectly fine to mill it and immediately use it. The exception, as I've already mentioned earlier, are pie crust, because we want everything to be cool or cold when making pie crust, so it doesn't start melting your fat. So that's the only exception, but generally speaking, use it right away. All right, question number 4, last but not least, how long does freshly milled flour last? Now, it's funny whenever I receive this question, because to be honest, I think it's a completely irrelevant question. Because for us true grainies, we stock up on the wheat berries, not the flour. We focus on the whole grains to mill it fresh, so we're not worried about having to store flour. But for those of you who are just curious of how long freshly milled flour lasts, I do not actually know from experience, because again, I do it on demand. Whenever I need it, I get flour basically on demand. But according to Google, freshly milled flour, if stored properly out, not in a fridge or a freezer, usually lasts anywhere from 3 to 9 months. And by last, I mean that you've lost a lot of your nutrients, but it at least hasn't gone rancid. So 3 to 9 months. As far as in the freezer, so this is relevant if you have a little bag of a little bit of flour in there. Many people state that it can last up to 6 months. But again, with the exception of your little bag in the freezer that I'm usually going through very fast anyway, there's no reason that you, my friends, who are following me on this channel, should be storing flour. No. We store the wheat berries, the whole grains, not the flour. So that is actually my answer to this, is don't focus on the flour, focus on the grains, and then mill them yourself fresh. So hopefully this helps answer many of y'all's questions regarding the actual flour part of our freshly milled flour. And if you're looking for places to buy grains so you can have your flour on demand, freshly milled and true whole grain flour, then be sure to check out my website. Got a new URL this time to make it easier to remember, grainsandgrit.com/buygrains. And I'll be sure to link it here and in the description box below. But there on my website, I do keep a running list. I do try to keep it updated with the places that I recommend to purchase your wheat berries from, as well as any and all coupon codes that I have for y'all. So be sure to check it out. Again, grainsandgrit.com/buygrains. And as always, I hope this video was helpful for y'all. Hope you have a wonderful week, and I'll see you next week. Bye.
All right, there you go, y'all. So what do you think? Do you feel more confident now of making that leap and getting starting milling your own grains? I would love to know what you think in the description box below. And as a reminder, be sure to check out 4 Generations Organic Farms, because you got to get wheat berries. When you get your grain mill, you got to get your wheat berries, and you want to make sure you get them at a good price, but also clean wheat berries that are going to feed your family very nutritious wheat. And 4 Generations is one of my favorite companies to buy my hard red and hard white wheat from. I actually recommend starting off with their Butler's Gold of their hard red wheat, and then they of course only have one line of hard white wheat, and both of them are excellent. I love that they're shipped to my house in sealed buckets with oxygen absorbers, so they go straight into my shed until I need them. So again, that's grainsandgrit.com/4generations. All right, and I almost forgot the big announcement is, y'all, this was just a mini course. I am actually going to be coming out very soon with the ultimate mega whole milling 101, how to get started with milling your grains. Yes, this has been in the making for a couple years now. I've been meaning to launch it, but it is finally going to be launching soon. This is everything. We chase every rabbit. It is all of my secrets. Very in-depth tutorial with milling your own grains, and it's all going to be conveniently online for y'all to be able to watch it whenever is convenient for y'all. So you don't want to miss out this big announcement when it is released. And in order to not miss out and to get first knowledge, just sign up for the waiting list, and I will be emailing y'all first off whenever the course is officially launching. So just go to grainsandgrit.com/grains course. Very simple to sign up for it, and you'll be notified as soon as it is released. I am very excited about this course because I think it's really going to be helpful to really get you started milling grains, baking bread, and also having success doing it all at home. So that's it, y'all. I hope that y'all have an excellent and wonderful day. I'm really excited about this course coming out, and hopefully this mini course was helpful for y'all. And as always, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I'll see you next week. Bye.